here at Dean's Forum. I'm Broderick Greer, one of the priests here at St. John's, and am happy to be with you today. And I'm really excited to introduce to a lot of you our music team, part of our music team from the Wilderness, which we call our Ancient Future service at 5 p.m. But before we begin, we will, as we always do, begin with prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy God, who in heaven has established choirs and choruses of angels and archangels to praise your holy name. We thank you for the gifts and skills of musicians and artists who magnify your love, your beauty, your truth, and your goodness in the praise of your people. Perfect our praises. Give us grateful hearts. And may we continue to be moved by these musicians' gifts among us. It is in the name of Christ that we pray. Amen. That was an improvised prayer because I could not find the collect for musicians and artists in the Book of Common Prayer. So if you come across it, let me know what page number it's on. You know how those things work. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to say this great prayer from the Book of Common Prayer, and you can't say it if you can't find it. So I want to introduce our guest this morning. And actually, if y'all would introduce yourselves and just tell us your name, your experiences, kind of as professional musicians, and then your experience at Wilderness and kind of how long you've been associated with the Wilderness service.
Right. Well, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Stephanie Chang, and my experience really in terms of music and growing up is that my parents were opera singers, and my mom was a voice teacher for many years as I was growing up, and so it became a very natural thing for me growing up in music and all kinds of music to be a musician. And so as I got older, I also got into dancing, and I spent a number of years in my 20s and early 30s in New York City, and I did a lot of musical theater. I worked a lot regionally, and that was kind of my career path for many years. And I found my way out to Colorado because in my travels of working, I worked a couple summers up at the Central City Opera and loved it. And so my mom ended up moving out here from Kansas City one of the summers that I was working out here. And so 6 months later, I came out here from New York just to visit her, and I was like, that's it, I'm ready to leave New York. So I came out to Colorado, and I've been here for a little over 12 years. And I came to the Wilderness through probably about 6 or 7 years ago through Kate Eaton, who really kind of started this the music for the Wilderness, which I know Ryan will get a little bit more into. But I came in really as kind of a sub to substitute for the music for the Wilderness, and so I was doing a couple of services here and there, and my experience in starting to sing this music was it was extraordinary because I grew up in the Presbyterian church and, very traditional hymns, and that's really what I was used to. And so when I started to do these arrangements of these hymns in this, way that Ryan and Chad and Kate, really had arranged them, I was just so moved and so blown away. At first, I was like, are you allowed to arrange hymns in this way? And I have had the most extraordinary experience. And so I moved into becoming the full-time soloist really for the Wilderness just these last 6 or 7 years, and it's been an amazing experience to be in this community and to play music with amazing musicians. So that's kind of my story.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then, Ryan, you've been a part of Wilderness for a very, very, very long time. So tell us kind of about how you came to us, and what your role really is in terms of planning music according to seasons and things like that.
Sure. Well, my name is Ryan McCarthy, and I work in the Denver area as a piano player and a piano teacher, and that's what I do full time. And part of what I do is here at the Wilderness. And I first got a call from Kate Eaton, who I'm sure you'll be hearing about, this morning a lot. My wife and Kate had a mutual friend, and so through this mutual friend, Kate heard, okay, this guy plays piano. I'm looking for a piano player, and that was in 2011. 2011 was when I first started playing the service. So it started in 2007, and in 2011, I got a call to see if I would be interested in playing it, and got together with Kate, and it was good, really good chemistry, and so and then eventually her vision was always to start the service and then move on and kind of put it into other people's hands and to go on and start other services. And she still is doing that. She's now in Florida, and she's still working with musicians and getting things going in Florida. So in about summer of 2012 is when Chad is the regular percussion player and co-music director with me. He couldn't be here today, so we have our wonderful friend Ed, who he'll introduce himself in a moment. But in 2012, Chad and I took over the duties of music directing and finding musicians and arranging hymns. And so nowadays we do a mix of some hymns that had been already arranged by Kate from before I was even a part of the Wilderness. We have hymns that Kate and Chad and I all arranged together. We also have music that Chad and I have done since Kate has stepped away from the Wilderness. So it's kind of a mix of all those things, but we really try to honor the original vision that Kate had for the Wilderness, as well as kind of bring our own flavor and our own ideas to it as well.
So if you would give us a sample of kind of a typical song that is sung or played at the Wilderness.
Okay.
With pleasure.
You can do that.
This is If Thou But Trust in God to Guide Thee.
If thou but trust in God to guide thee, and hope in Him through all thy ways, He'll give thee strength whate'er betide thee, and bear thee through the evil days. Who trusts in God's unchanging love builds on a rock that none can move. Sing, pray, and keep His ways unswerving. So do thine own part faithfully, and trust His word, though undeserving, thou yet shalt find it true for thee. God yet forsook in need, the soul that trusted him indeed. Oh, 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 oh.
So, for those of you who are familiar with the hymnal 1982, which is our authorized hymnal, and one of the funniest things I've ever heard, it was at clergy conference a few months ago, and clergy are notoriously not funny. And this, the ELCA bishop, the Lutheran bishop for Colorado, Wyoming, the whole Rocky Mountain Synod, it's so funny. You know how different denominations, there are always subtleties there, even though we have a lot of things in common. And Lutherans update their hymnals apparently a lot more often than we do. And so he says to us, your hymnal, the last one was from 1982, and he wasn't saying that in a funny way, and everyone just started laughing, and we were like, yes, we're sorry to admit our last hymnal was when disco was the most prevalent popular music. But if you'll notice, all of you who attend our morning services are very familiar with the hymnal 1982. The selection of hymnody, the selection of style and kind of ethos there. And there is a diversity. And if you'll notice, the text and really the melody of the hymn that they just rendered to us is a familiar hymn in the hymnal 1982. So, Ryan, if you would just tell us a little bit about kind of your rationale and Kate's rationale, Chad's rationale around rearranging familiar hymns from the Episcopal hymnal.
Yeah. I think I have to admit it's somewhat intuitive, meaning when Chad and I will sit down with a hymn, we typically, we would get together for, an hour to an hour and a half to work on music, to arrange a whole season. We do music in the wilderness by seasons, which is, during Advent, we'll do Advent music. We go through the church calendar, and then after Pentecost, we'll kind of create our own seasons, which are 4 to 6 weeks of the same music week after week. And so we would get together and we would play through the hymn, and if the melody seemed like great, we would just keep the same melody. And this is a good example of that. It has such a wonderful, mysterious, ancient-sounding melody that we didn't feel the need to modify that at all. Obviously, the accompaniment is a little bit different, so if the melody had if the hymn had a good melody, we would typically keep that, but then figure out a way to make it feel a little bit more ancient, a little bit more atmospheric, if you will, and a lot of that has to do with the percussion. Having some percussion gives it a little bit more of an earthy, ancient feel to it. Having the keyboard sound gives it a little bit more of a cinematic feel, a little bit more, something a little bit more polished and sophisticated to it. But what we would do is try to find that spot for that hymn. But if somehow, some hymns' melodies didn't do it for us,
yeah,
I'll say. And so in that case, we would compose our own original music to it. We would actually compose a brand new melody. And sometimes we would borrow ideas from the hymnal. If the words are working with a particular melody, we don't have to start completely from scratch. We might use the same rhythm of the melody. We might use a similar cadence that the melody has, but change some of the notes just to make it feel a little bit more appropriate for the wilderness. And that's what I mean by it's a little intuitive, meaning whatever that meant to us, whatever appropriate for the wilderness meant, that was good enough for us. So if it kind of had an earthy, ancient feel to it, we went with it. We didn't overthink it.
Well, and I find myself saying, and I get to work with one of my portfolios at St. John's is being a part of leading the liturgical planning team for Wilderness. And so I get to work very closely with Ryan and Chad, especially on planning seasons, planning music. And you would actually be surprised the number of calls we get every year. We get between 5 or 10 calls a year from other Episcopal churches around the country that are very interested in what we're doing at the Wilderness and kind of the feel of it and the ethos and all of that. And what I always tell people that cannot, unfortunately, be replicated, that we are very fortunate to have here is our musicians and their intuition about how Wilderness not only feels, but how it sounds. And I know if Richard were here, he would be doing a riff on the subtleties kind of within a liturgical setting that are often kind of intangible if you're not a part of the planning. And so people think, oh, well, is it a Taizé service? And we all are kind of familiar with Episcopal churches that do Taizé on Sunday nights. And Taizé is a ecumenical outfit out of France that produces music and prayers and things like that. And we do very, very little Taizé at Wilderness. And then other people ask, is it a Celtic service? You know, you kind of have these trends in the church of, styles of music and worship that are kind of the thing of the day. And right now, Celtic worship and Taizé worship are very, very in vogue. Wilderness is not either of those things. One of, and y'all, I think will sing this in just a moment, a Sanctus, and we all know the Sanctus is the portion of the service during the Eucharistic prayer where we say, holy, holy, holy. That line is drawn from the 6th chapter of Isaiah, the book of the prophet Isaiah. And the Sanctus, and I think it actually is drawn from the hymnal 1982, but y'all have rearranged it for a wilderness feel. You'll keep hearing us say that over and over. And that tune, though, is very, very old. It's Gregorian chant.
Yeah, the one we're going to be doing is actually an original.
Oh, this one is original.
Melody.
Okay.
Yes.
But the one we're doing, and I would encourage you to come and try Wilderness over the next couple of weeks, because the one we're doing at Wilderness during this season is a Gregorian chant-styled Sanctus. So contrast that with what we're now about to hear from our musicians.
And I do want to mention real quick that we will do seasons of the Wilderness that are purposefully draw from particular world music traditions. We will do seasons that are purposefully Celtic. We have done seasons that are Middle Eastern in flavor, seasons that are Indian in flavor. And so we kind of do, we try not to do anything in particular necessarily, but I think all of those are options all the time.
Yes.
So we'll say, hey, let's do this kind of a season. And some seasons there is no overarching theme. It's just, obviously we've been doing it for so long that the wilderness has its own personality now.
Exactly.
That has become what we do. So here is a Sanctus. This is an example of an ancient text set to an original melody that Chad and I wrote together. So here is the Sanctus. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
Lord, God of power and might. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest.
Isn't that beautiful? And that's actually one. I hate to say this, I did not know that y'all composed that.
Oh, yeah.
It's one that we use a lot at Wilderness, and it's very much, in some way, indigenous, as you would say, to what we do and what we're about at that 5 p.m. service. So, I mean, Ryan, what would you say in terms of, that's an ancient text. I mean, the Sanctus, the text of the Sanctus predates in many, I mean, it does predate the New Testament. It's original to the Hebrew Bible. So what would you say about setting an ancient text to a contemporary melody?
I think we definitely try to learn and borrow as much from traditional settings of these texts as well. We don't try to necessarily do anything too different. You know, I mean, the fact that you say, "I didn't realize you composed that," well, that's great. You know, that's what we want. We don't want it to be something that's so different that it feels out of place at the Wilderness, right? Or out of place in the Episcopal Church. So I think we take especially cadences and rhythms from previous settings, and we'll borrow those, borrow that. But I know that some of the musical conventions that we have landed on, I mean, we've been doing, Chad, I'll just mention this for Chad. He played the original Wilderness service in 2007.
Wow.
So he's played it since 2007. I've played it since 2011. So we've been doing this quite a while. Yeah. So it kind of has its own tradition, its own cadence, its own conventions, I should say, and its own vocabulary musically. And so at this point, when we kind of know what works musically, what doesn't work musically, and so we're able to draw on that and kind of trust the foundations of that, for the vocabulary of the Wilderness. So if we ever write a new piece of music, we have a good starting place, and then we kind of see, okay, how can we elevate this? How can we take it further? And the Wilderness is a community. You know, there are people who have been going to the Wilderness for years and years, and so we always think about the people and serving the people, serving the service itself. What's going to serve? What's not going to serve? You know, we always want the music to support and serve what's happening in the worship during the service.
And I would say too, one of the things that is unique to St. John's is the scale of our sacred space. That we're hearing a sampling of this in Dagwell Hall. This music is not meant for Dagwell Hall. This music is meant to be heard north of us on the other side of the block. So that's just important for us to note as well. So if you would now give us a traditional hymn that we're all pretty familiar with that is in the style of the Wilderness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is one you will definitely recognize. The melody is intact, the words are intact, everything is there, but just has a little flair to it.
Episcopalians love this hymn.
2, 3, 1, 2. Absolutely. Yeah, this is one you will definitely recognize. The melody is intact, the words are intact, everything is there, but just a little. Yeah, this is when you get a little flair to it. The melody is intact, the words are intact, everything is there, but just a little.
Streams every blessing,
The melody is intact, the words are intact, everything is there.
Streams every blessing, teach me to my heart. Streams every blessing, teach me to my heart. Here I find my greatest treasure, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, when deferring fold of God, he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. Thank you.
Do y'all recognize that one? I kind of feel like it's Come Thou Fount is almost like the Episcopal national anthem. Episcopalians love that hymn. And because we're kind of a little short on time, if y'all would also give us a sampling of a new hymn with an original tune as well.
Yes, absolutely. So this is God is Love, Let Heaven Adore Him, which the hymnal melody is God is love, let heaven adore him. God is love, let earth rejoice. If you're familiar with that. But, and this isn't to disparage that melody at all. It's a beautiful melody. But at some point, and I'll be honest, I'm not even sure when in the last 10 years this setting was written, but this is one that Chad and I did together. So this is God is love, let heaven adore him.
God is love, let heaven adore him. God is love, let earth rejoice. Let creation sing before him and exalt him with one voice. God who laid the earth's foundation, God who spread the heavens above, God who breathes through all creation, God is love, eternal love. God is love, and love enfolds us, all the world in one embrace, with unfailing grasp, God holds us, every child of every race. And when human hearts are breaking under sorrow's iron rod, then we find that self-same aching deep within the heart of God. Oh, God is love, and though with blindness sin afflicts all human life, God's eternal loving kindness guides us through our earthly strife. Sin and death and hell shall never o'er us final triumph gain. God is love, so love forever o'er the universe must reign. Oh, 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 oh.
And doesn't that music just kind of take you to a place of prayer? I mean, it's so centering, and that kind of brings us to our conclusion, which is one of the other dimensions of this service that is intangible and that in many ways cannot be described, is kind of for our morning services, we would call this the prayers of the people, which is scripted, linear, gives us spaces and pauses for spontaneous prayer. But the prayers of the people at the wilderness, and it's so funny that Richard referred to this in the email as prayers of the people. I was like, we don't have prayers of the people at the wilderness. And then I realized what he was doing. We call it open space. So it's in the time of the service that immediately follows the sermon or reflection is called open space, and people are invited at that time to wander the cathedral in prayer. People pray with icons, they pray at prayer stations. Some people remain and are called to stay in their seats. So Ryan, if you would speak to us a little bit about the role of lyricless music in the wilderness.
Yeah, definitely one of the big values of the wilderness is to be a space where the person attending can participate or not participate as much as they want to. And I know that we've even had testimonies of people who have come to the wilderness, have been going through a really tough time in their lives, and they may never have even sung any of the hymns or didn't for a while, but what they were able to do was sit in the back, sit in the dark, and have, as they put it, an hour of peace once a week. And it was the only place in their life where they could get some peace. And so creating an atmosphere where that can happen is very important. Mm-hmm. And so the instrumental music is important for that because it creates that atmosphere. It creates a place for people to be able to pray, to be able to be quiet, where they're not necessarily called upon to respond or speak or sing or do anything unless they want to, and that's fine. But the place where the time in the service where it's just instrumental is always so important, because it creates that sense of this is just a time of prayer, reflection, and everyone is invited into it as much or as little as they want to be. And I know that that's definitely our heart as the musicians, is not to have that time be about the music at all. It is a time of accompanying what everyone is doing in the cathedral. Mm-hmm. That's what we want. We want it to be a time where our music is supporting and accompanying what's happening, is not a distraction, is not a performance. It's not a time for us to, show you what we got or anything like that. It's a time for us to be present, and I think that's what's so special, is we try to be as present with what's happening in the cathedral that night as much as everyone is, and what has happened, even what's happening in the world, what happened in the sermon, what the sermon is about. These things are all inform kind of the atmosphere of the wilderness, and we try to support that with what we're doing musically. If it seems to be a more joyful time, it might be a more joyful music thing. If there seems to be more of a grieving happening at the cathedral, just over the years, many things have happened, and there's been space for all of that at the wilderness, both joyful celebration and quiet contemplation, grieving and mourning. These are all things that we try to create space for, based on what's happening, in the world, in the cathedral, in the people, trying to follow that.
And so, if you would give us a sampling of, so imagine a dimly lit cathedral with some light support from the ceiling lighting, but mainly candle lit. There are icons, prayer stations all around, kind of in every nook and cranny. And people are up in the chancel, people are down in the nave, people are in kind of the ambulatory spaces, lighting candles, etc. And this is the kind of music you would hear during this time. And I'll only say this because I'm sitting here and I see it. There was no music on the page for this. I mean, this was completely improvised, and this is the quality that we get every Sunday at Wilderness. So let's give our musicians a hand, our guests this morning. I got us started a little bit behind, so we do have, so we'll go over about 3 or 4 minutes. So we do have time for 1 or 2 questions from the gathered audience. So please, if you have a question, please raise your hand. Enrique will then bring you a mic. Do not start speaking before you're on mic, because if you remember, we have people who are watching us from home that will not be able to hear you without a mic. So we'll go to Mel first. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Thank you.
Stephanie, are you ever part of that non-vocal music?
No, I'm not vocally. Occasionally, I have played a tingsha, or it's been a while since I've done had any part of that. I typically take that time to just go within and use that time as meditation and enjoy the music.
We have one more from John there.
This is for your percussionist. How do you do it?
I just bang on things, that's all. So my name's Ed Contreras. I've been playing for over 50 years.
Wow.
And doing a lot of different kinds of music over the years. I'm basically self-taught, but I love world music especially. So I would discover instruments from India, from Africa, from Brazil, learn how to play them, and then just kind of incorporate them into the music thing. So part of what I do as a percussionist is rather than focus on me, and Ryan talked about this a little bit, is I focus on what's going on in the music. I try to make whatever it is that we're doing sound wonderful, as opposed to showing off my chops or really cool things. Music is a language, and it's incredibly spiritual. It doesn't matter what kind of music it is, the style or anything. And so I just feel like I've been gifted by the Creator to really kind of lock into what's going on and to help the music, not just to play cool things. I got lots of cool things here, but I use it to contribute to what's going on. Does that kind of answer your question? Oh, good. Okay. Thanks.
We do have time for one more question. Thank you so much, Ken.
I'm interested in the history of the Wilderness Service. Where did it start? How long ago? And what was the objective?
So from what I can tell, and Ryan, you can probably speak to this better than I can, we actually found a Denver Post article from 2008, a little bit after Wilderness started, and I think that the canon, who's sort of, from what we can tell, was very involved in the first couple of years was Polson Reed, who has now gone on to become Bishop of Oklahoma. And it was at a time in the church's history, not only at St. John's, but across Christianity in the U.S., that was called the Emerging Church Movement. And it was kind of the rediscovery by Protestant churches of ancient Christian practices around prayer and liturgy. It mainly happened in evangelical churches, but there was some residual impact on the Episcopal Church. I think that Dean Peter picked up on that, Polson picked up on that, and wanted to bring something like that to St. John's. And then, Ryan, you can speak a little bit more probably to Kate's role in kind of the musical dimension of bringing that about.
Yeah, and Kate Eaton was, what she wanted to do was bring bring that ancient, there's kind of a renewal of being interested in ancient things, from what I understand from that time period in the church. And so I think that's one of the things that she wanted to create, was something that had world music, that had that felt old but also vital and new at the same time. And so she would pull things from the hymnal, but also Lorena McKennett, and I'm kind of blanking on a few other kind of world-flavored artists that she would bring in their music. I know when I first started playing the prelude music, that we do a 10-minute prelude at the beginning of every service. The prelude music was from I believe an Icelandic composer that she had found. So she kind of would dig deep and kind of unearth these things, and now we just kind of take that same. We try to stay true to some of that, and keep a lot of the same world music flavor. A lot of that has to do with the percussion. That's not a typical Episcopal church, typical church instrument, and so that really gives it a lot of that flair. And I will say, what we do today, it's not like it has been this fully formed this entire time, for the last 15 years. It developed, and there were some times the music didn't really work, and sometimes we made lots of I'll call them mistakes over the years, just things that just didn't quite hit the nail on the head, and so just over the years there's been a lot of growing and a lot of refining to kind of give us what we have today.
Yes, thank you for that question. Great questions. Let's give our guests another hand. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you for your gifts, your skills, how you enhance the life of St. John's Cathedral. There are many people who come to us to Wilderness who are not comfortable in a Sunday morning service, or a Sunday morning service doesn't work for their schedule. And so the fact that we're able to offer 3 distinct liturgies on a Sunday is proof of 2 things. It's proof that we're a dynamic church. And number 2, and more importantly, it's proof that teamwork, and I hate to be a cliche on this, but teamwork really does make the dream work, because we are in touch with numerous musicians across the 3 services that make them happen. Our vicars choral and organists for the Sunday morning services, all of our Wilderness musicians. We have lots of subs that come in, lots of, I think that 4th chair is kind of always changing every season. So when you're praying this week, just give God thanks for all of the musicians and artists and liturgists who make all of this possible at a very, very high level. And then if you would please join us next Sunday for, who is our guest next Sunday? I can't remember. And I saw Alan Yarborough, who is the officer for the Episcopal Church Office of Government Relations, so there's going to be a completely shift in our theme. So we're going into election season, and he's going to come and talk to us about the denomination's positions on various political questions that are coming up in the fall. So Alan Yarborough will be with us next week. Bring your little blue book that you got in the mail this past week from the state, and be here to pick Alan's brain.
We can just come and play music during that, if that would help.
Yeah, that'll make that less stressful. Exactly. Yeah, a lot less stressful. Again, God bless you. We'll see you at 10:30.